Now, looking at the public count, right? The public count has lost over $100,000 of value in the past about month or so, right? Well over $100,000 in a month. We're at about 1.74 million right now. We're at 1.8 plus, back at the beginning of July, right? So that's a lot of value to lose in a pretty short amount of time, right? And, today, a day like today, down $37,000 in the public account, right? It's very common for my net worth to move around, $100,000 on a day, right? 6 figures in a day. And just as easy as that $37,000 losses in the public account today, tomorrow could be up $37,000, right? And a lot of people don't understand how to process that, right? The variance of your net worth moving around, 6 figures in a day between everything, right? And I'll put it to you like this. If you are somebody that gets started young and with smaller amounts of money, it is so much easier mentally to build up to a place where you don't even really think about it in terms of that variance of money. So if you haven't got to those sorts of levels, you look around and you're like, oh my gosh, that's so crazy. How could you, up and down and all around and all these, huge amounts and sums of money that are moving around, right? It's the same thing as when I was, a youngin' investing my first few $100, right? This was my first time I ever went to Vegas. This was in 2009 with my brother, right? They were still building City Center back in those days at that particular time, right? And my net worth might have been $1,000, maybe less than $1,000. So at that given moment, for instance, right, if I, each day my net worth probably moved around $10, $20, maybe $30. My net worth's moving around, right? Which is a big variance. It doesn't sound like a big number, but as a percent, it was a huge number for me at that time, right? Heck, if my net worth's moving around $10, $20, $30, if I just go out to dinner one time at a restaurant and spend $20 on myself, $10 on myself, that's a big variance, right? So when you build up from the small amounts, this is why it's so important to get started investing as young as possible. So there's going to be a moment when it's like $10 to $20, $30 is your big variance, right? And then you start building up. And I still remember when, my net worth would move around $100 in a day. Wow. Oh my gosh. I still remember when my net worth started moving around $1,000 in a day. I remember when my net worth started moving around $10,000 a day. And now 6 figures a day. Someday it's going to be 7 figures a day. Someday it's going to be 8 figures a day. And someday it's going to be 9 and 10 figures a day. My net worth will be moving in a day. In a day. When you just build up the ranks and you keep building and building and building, you don't even think about it. It's just part of the process. The issue is usually what I find when people have trouble with variance, it's people that maybe saved their whole life, right? They didn't really invest money. Then they wait till their 40s and 50s, try to get in the financial markets when they already saved a lot of money. And then they start experiencing variance. If you haven't gone up the ranks, it's like a whole different world for you. It's the same. It's the equivalent of, let's say, I don't know how many people watch sports that are watching this video. Let's say you watch football. Or let's say you watch basketball, right? It's equivalent of just throwing some random 40-year-old guy into an NBA game and saying, good luck against LeBron tonight, okay? Or throwing him in an NFL game and saying, good luck tackling Derrick Henry today. Have fun with that, okay? Or good luck racing Usain Bolt or whatever it is, right? Good luck in this tennis match against, Serena Williams. Good luck to you, okay? If you're in your 40s or 50s or whatever and you just get thrown into that, oh my gosh, you're so out of sorts, you haven't experienced it. However, the person that has gone up the ranks and they played as a kid, right? And they got better and better and they were one of the best as a kid. And then they grew into a teenager and they become one of the best when they were teenagers. And then they went to the next ranks and they were one of the best in college. And then in the pros, they're not thrown off by the variance and what they have to deal with there. But if you're just, thrown in there, you go straight to the pros when you haven't even gone through the ranks, you're going to be so out of sorts and it's going to make it go crazy. Oh my gosh, my money, it's moving around so much, I'm losing. For me, it's nothing. 2022 was vicious to me. It was just another year. 2022 was the worst year for me ever financially. And at the end of the day, it wasn't even that much. It wasn't even much for me to take mentally. Truthfully. It wasn't even that much for me to take mentally. I had to shut down my Hungry Bull app that year. Lost a ton on stocks. It was vicious, man. I had to let go, several people that worked for me under the Hungry Bull project and all that stuff, right? At the end of the day, it was just another year. It was a vicious year, but it was just another year because I'm used to the roller coaster ride of the financial markets, right? And sometimes it's absolutely phenomenal. And you're making so much money, you're like, I don't know where to put all this damn money. Like, there's too much. And there's other time periods when it's vicious on the other side. If you've graduated up the ranks, this doesn't faze you. You're not bothered by this. It just is what it is. Tapestry, TPR, really, really tough decision. This stock did so tremendous for such a long time. The stock performed tremendous for us, up $22,000 plus. That doesn't even include all the dividend money I made from Tapestry over the years. It's been a pillar of the of the dividend portfolio for several years. And to have to sell out of this one, it's a very, 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 very tough decision here today. But the news was so bad in regards to what's going on with Tapestry that I was like, I've got to pull the plug on this one. So what's going on here? Well, the first thing you got to understand is where Tapestry's at kind of cash levels wise, okay? So as of last quarter, they had about $651 million in cash. Now, for a company Tapestry size, that's a pretty good amount of money. That's not like a crazy sum of cash on the balance sheet, but that's a good chunk of change. And in terms of debt, they had about $1.6 billion of long-term debt. So for a company like Tapestry, very profitable business, good cash flow business, this is actually a pretty acceptable balance sheet. There's certainly many stocks I hold that have better balance sheets than this, but this is just fine. This is, I would grade it like a B grade type balance sheet that Tapestry had, maybe like a B minus, C plus type balance sheet that Tapestry had here. Everything was just fine and dandy. But things have changed, okay? So Tapestry just announced, which if you didn't know Tapestry, they own Coach, Kate Spade, and Stuart Weitzman, three very successful brands. They just announced that they're going to buy the Capri Company, which was another public company, and those brands are Versace, Jimmy Choo, and Michael Kors. Now, I have no problem with those brands. I think those are very famous brands, and I think they're going to do just fine over time, right? So that might sound actually very exciting, right? Oh, man, they're buying out Versace and Jimmy Choo and Michael Kors. That sounds amazing, right? There's no such thing as a free lunch in this world, right? No such thing as a free lunch. Economics 101, right? They paid $57 a share to make this buyout happen, and it's an enterprise value of approximately $8.5 billion in regards to this decision, okay? The transaction is not subject to financing condition. Tapestry has secured $8 billion in fully committed bridge financing from Bank of America and Morgan Stanley senior funding. The purchase price of approximately $8.5 billion is expected to be funded by a combination of senior notes, term loans, and excess Tapestry cash, which we know Tapestry has some cash, but they don't have that much cash. You know what I mean? Like they don't even have $1 billion of cash, and there's an $8 billion plus deal, right? So that's going to be very, very small. A portion of which will be used to pay certain Capri existing outstanding debt. Now let's go ahead and look at what Capri has going on balance sheet wise, right? They had a very low amount of cash. I think it was less than $300 million at the end of last quarter. They have long-term debt on this company of about $1.8 billion in regards to Capri, right? So we're talking about Capri didn't have necessarily the best balance sheet in the world, right? They didn't have an awful balance sheet, but it certainly wasn't that great, right? And not only that, but the other issue is, like, this company's has some problems going on, okay? Versace revenues last quarter were down 13%, right? Jimmy Choo revenues were down over 3% last quarter. Michael Kors revenues were down about 11% last quarter. You could say, well, if a constant currency basis, maybe things might have been a little better. Sure. But at the end of the day, like, it's clearly they're having some issues with their brand. So basically, Tapestry is going to likely take over this company at some point in 2024. And they are going to have to fix the businesses, right? They're going to have to fix Versace. They're going to have to fix Michael Kors. And they're going to have to fix Jimmy Choo. They're going to have to get those businesses back to growth, right? While also, like, focusing on their businesses. That's going to be a messy situation. That's going to be a lot to deal with on a lot of fronts. Then trying to combine two big companies together like that and trying to figure out what employees to get rid of from the other company, it's going to be a process. We're not talking about this is just some easy, boom, it's all together tomorrow or something like that. This is a long process we're going to have to go through here, okay? A long process. But the worst part of all this is now they're going to be in a mountain of debt, an absolute mountain of debt for this company, right? And so I'm looking out and I'm like, do I really want to hold this Tapestry company that has done me tremendous over time when they're going to have to try to fix these brands, get these brands like Versace, Jimmy Choo, and Michael Kors back to growth, while simultaneously taking on insane levels of debt, which make the company far more risky to invest in now at this point in time, right? Never mind that, they're doing this in a time period where we're in a very scary time period to do a deal like this. Interest rates are extremely high right now. They're the highest they've pretty much been in 20 plus years. So if you're talking about doing a big debt deal, I mean, this is probably the most unattractive time to do it that I've seen certainly in my financial life. I've been in the markets for 15 years. I've never seen a less attractive time to be making a big purchase like this. But not only that, you got to think about the cycle we're in right now of super low unemployment. What happens if the economy gets hit in 24 and 25? What does that mean for Tapestry's profitability? Well, I can tell you what happens when recessions happen, especially medium-sized recessions or large recessions. Guess what? Sales of everything go down, okay? It's not what it used to be, which means profitability goes down, which means when you're buying out a company like Capri, it could be actually far less profitable in a recessionary scenario. Same thing with a company like obviously Coach, right? So overall, I'm just totally in a disagreement for this deal. It's way too big to bite off for Tapestry. They're gonna be in loads of debt for probably decades to go in the future, because you got to understand, Tapestry also pays out big fatty dividends, right? And the yields I was getting on the shares I bought was ridiculous. And so they pay out these huge dividends. They just up their dividends again. So they're going to have so much cash flow going to those dividends. Meanwhile, you're going to have this mess of trying to combine these two companies together. And you're going to have all this debt to pay down over time. That's going to be at pretty high interest rates, I can tell you that. Pretty dang high interest rates. It's not an attractive situation. And so for me, I had to cut this one loose here today, and I did make the decision to sell out of my shares. And like I said, I never saw this one coming.